victim count, courtesy of the Biden administration, continues to pile up. Victims of illegal immigration are denied justice and recourse. Whole industries are suddenly facing total extinction, and Americans are experiencing needless job losses. You might be asking yourself, why would the socialist supremacists that are in charge of the U.S. government be so eager to harm Americans that allegedly just voted them into power? The answer is alarming but predictable. Socialist Democrats serving communist China, not you. That's the wake-up call we provide in tonight's preamble. Members of the communist cult have been preaching their new religion for some time now, the theory of man-made global warming. They've not proved their theory, rather, they've been slavishly devoted to the myth for decades now. It's reminiscent of the Heaven's Gate cult. You might remember they were a UFO religious cult based near San Diego. On March 26, 1997, deputies of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department discovered the bodies of 39 members of the group, including their founder, in a house in Rancho Santa Fe. They had all committed suicide. Now, there's a fundamental difference between the Heaven's Gate cult and the communist cult. The communist cult we call the Democrats. The Democrats don't believe in sacrificing themselves. They believe in sacrificing you. Case in point, Joe Biden's announcement that every aspect of America's government will now be making decisions based on the theory of man-made global warming.
To summarize this executive order, it's about jobs, good-paying union jobs. It's about workers, building our economy back better than before. It's a whole-of-government approach. Put climate change at the center of our domestic, national security, and foreign policy. It's advancing conservation, revitalizing communities in cities and on the farmlands, and securing environmental justice.
Okay, let me put this as diplomatically and gently as I possibly can. That was utter BS. Just a load of nonsensical tripe and fabricated terms. But even though Biden's statements were complete sophistry, his pre-scripted gibberish has a goal and a consequence: the destruction of American lives. We interviewed one of Biden's victims yesterday. His name was Neil Crabtree. He, along with more than 11,000 other victims, had their jobs wiped out by a stroke of Joe Biden's pen when he stopped construction on the Keystone XL pipeline. How are you going to make ends meet if you're the sole provider for your family and you got 3 boys to take care of? Now that your job is gone, how are you planning on making ends meet here?
The Biden administration, they promise, some new jobs, but I believe that the only jobs that are going to be available are going to be at the unemployment office. They're going to have to hire a lot of people to process all these unemployment claims that are going to be coming in. So I'm pretty sure that I may be able to get a job there.
Well, this is interesting because let me ask you, so are you saying that somebody from the Biden administration, after they killed your job, did they reach out to you and say, hey, we've got some opportunities for you?
Oh, absolutely not. But I think the policies they're trying to implement are pointing me in the unemployment direction. And I think that's going to be the new up and coming field the next 4 years.
The administration stood before the country and told many Americans that they should be thrilled with their loss of jobs because they were wrong to choose their line of work to begin with. And the government was there to punish them for choosing wrongly. Now, this didn't sit well with some leaders on Capitol Hill.
As you noted, he signed an order canceling the Keystone Pipeline. 11,000 jobs with a stroke of a pen he made go away. 8,000 of those are union jobs. And at the same time, he rejoined the Paris climate deal, which threatens to destroy thousands of high-paying jobs across this country. You know, John Kerry, in that same news conference you put up, he said, well, they need to learn to make better choices. What an arrogant, out-of-touch statement for a centimillionaire to say.
But that's the hallmark of socialist supremacists: elitism. It should be clear to any intelligent person watching that socialist Democrats are not interested in helping Americans. It's quite the opposite. Biden's cult is sacrificing everyday Americans to their God. And what God does the godless Democrat Party worship? Well, government, of course, is their God. But here's the insidious part. They don't even worship the American government. Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, the rest. They worship at the altar of another country's government. Allow me to illustrate with the Keystone XL pipeline example. Biden's cult said they canceled the pipeline and declared war on other parts of the energy industry because we are in a climate crisis. According to the sacred text of man-made global warming, CO2 emitted into the atmosphere is responsible for killing the planet Earth. That's not my rhetoric, that's theirs. With no scientific proof, the communist cult claims that this emergency is so dire that thousands of Americans must lose their jobs to save the planet. Is that true? Consider that John Kerry, who served in Vietnam, in response to a direct question, was forced to admit that if the United States went to zero emissions tomorrow, that 90% of the world's man-made CO2 would still be blowing into the air. Also consider that since the Keystone XL pipeline will not be built, the Canadian tar sands oil will not remain in the ground. That bears repeating for you otherwise intelligent people out there who have fallen prey to the propaganda of the communist cult. Simply because the Keystone pipeline will not be built doesn't mean Canada is going to leave the oil in the ground. I've got news for you. They will extract it. They will put it into a pipeline across Canada to their west coast, and they will dangerously load it onto tankers and send it to another country. That country just so happens to be the country that is worshipped by socialist Democrats in America, China. Xi Jinping is thrilled to get his hands on oil to power his economy and country. Oh, wait, this gets better. China will burn that oil and send the alleged planet-killing CO2 right into the air. And by the way, China has no EPA. They have no restrictions on their emissions. Anyone watching the Olympics a few years ago in China will remember how dirty that country's air is. Here's one more thing. China, as part of the Paris Climate Accord, is under no obligation to cut their CO2 emissions or stop their dirty pollution of the air. China's participation in the Paris Climate Accord as the #1 emitter of CO2 in the world is voluntary. So sending Canadian tar sands oil to China is worse and dirtier for the planet than allowing the United States to process the oil in an environmentally sound way. So if stopping the Keystone pipeline puts the world in greater danger, why did Biden make thousands of Americans lose their jobs? Here's another way to look at this. Biden and Kerry and the socialist supremacists claim that CO2 emissions are an emergency. They say that every day that CO2 is belched into the sky, our children's future is being killed. The super smart bartender turned Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says Earth has only 8 years until it is destroyed by CO2. Now, if that is the case, why aren't socialist Democrats calling for the United States to use our military to shut down China's planet-killing CO2-emitting power plants? Remember, they say this is a crisis. We only have 8 years, and China is the biggest CO2 emitter on the planet. Yet, socialist Democrats are not targeting and destroying China's economy. The socialist Democrats are targeting and destroying America's economy. It should be clear what Democrats' objectives are. Just like they use the China virus to destroy our rights, they're using the myth of man-made global warming to destroy the United States economy. They'll do this to please the object of their affection. They'll do this because that's what China wants them to do.